They told her she'd be a wife by sunset. Instead, she found a grave, a gun, and a fight for everything. Clara Wynne didn't come west to own land, fire a rifle, or stare down outlaws. She came for a man who made promises in ink. But when the wagon stopped rolling and the dust settled, her groom was dead, and her future had to be rewritten with grit, not hope. You ever wonder what happens when a woman loses everything and chooses to stay? The year was 1879. Clara Wynne sat stiff-backed in a stagecoach as it rattled across the wind-beaten plains of Montana Territory. Her fingers, pale from gripping too tightly, twisted the edge of a letter, the last one Nathaniel Brecker had sent her. His handwriting had been steady, confident, full of dreams, the kind of man who talked about livestock yields and sunrises like they were poems, the kind of man who made a schoolteacher from Pennsylvania pack up her life for a ranch she'd never seen. 6 weeks, rail cars, wagons, way stations, and stairs. Her corset had loosened with each mile westward, but her resolve had only hardened. Now the coach lurched to a stop. "Clear hollow," the driver barked, voice thick with trail dust. "End of the line." Clara stepped down into ankle-deep dirt. Her boots, new when she left home, were already worn. Her skirts caught the wind like sails. She glanced around. There was no bustling frontier town like Nathaniel had described. Just a wide dirt street, a few weather-beaten buildings, and silence so heavy it rang in her ears. "Someone was supposed to meet me," she told the driver, trying to sound confident. He removed his hat, scratched his head. "Miss Wynne, best see Sheriff Garland. He's in that office yonder." Her heart sank. "Why? Is something wrong?" But he didn't answer. He simply tipped his hat and unloaded her trunks with an apologetic nod. Inside the sheriff's office, time slowed. Sheriff John Garland was a large man with graying hair and eyes that had seen too much. He stood as Clara entered, voice low and steady. "Miss Wynne," he said, "I'm sorry. I was expecting you." Her mouth went dry. "Where is Nathaniel?" The sheriff gestured to the chair, but Clara stayed standing. "There was a raid," he said. 3 days ago, just east of town. Nathaniel and 2 hands were driving cattle. Ambushed, wagon torched. We believe it was the Denton gang." She blinked, not understanding. "I'm afraid Nathaniel didn't make it." For a moment, the room felt like it tilted. Clara sat, not because she chose to, but because her knees gave up. She'd crossed a continent for this man, sold her mother's silver, left behind everything that made sense, and now he was gone. I see," she whispered. "I can arrange for you to return east," Sheriff Garland offered. "There's a stage leaving next week. The hotel's got a room." Clara looked down at her hands at the band she had planned to wear tomorrow. "What will happen to his land?" "No will. No kin out here. My guess is the bank will claim it or maybe some neighbor will absorb it. But we were to be married," she insisted, pulling a letter from her bag. "He said I was to be his wife. Doesn't that mean something?" The sheriff looked at the paper. His expression softened, but he shook his head. "Not in the eyes of the law, Miss Wynne. I'm sorry." But Clara wasn't listening anymore. She was already somewhere else, in her mind standing on Nathaniel's land, seeing it, claiming it. "I want to see the ranch," she said. "Miss Wynne, it's half a day's ride. That land ain't safe." "I want to see it," Garland sighed. "All right, after the funeral. I'll take you myself." That night, Clara sat alone in the hotel, rereading Nathaniel's letters by lamplight. He'd written of a sturdy cabin, a creek that sparkled in moonlight, cattle that grazed in green fields. He'd written of a life he was ready to build, with her. "I'm not looking for a housemaid," he'd written. "I want a partner, a woman who can dream as big as I do." She folded the letter with trembling hands. She had come here to marry a man, but now the land was all that was left of him, and maybe, just maybe, it could still be enough. The morning of Nathaniel Brecker's funeral dawned sharp and clear. Clara Wynne stood at the edge of the crowd that had gathered on the wind-bitten hill above Clearwater Creek. 3 pine boxes rested on the rocky earth, each draped with a wool blanket. The townspeople stood in respectful silence, hat brims dipped low, hands folded, but none stood near her. She was still a stranger, still, the girl from back east who came to marry the dead man. Pastor Davies spoke gently of the fallen ranchers. Brave men, honest men, men who'd tried to build something in untamed soil. Clara barely heard him. She kept her eyes fixed on the middle casket, Nathaniel's. They'd never touched, never even met, and yet she mourned him like a widow. After the service, as the crowd dispersed, a woman in a faded blue dress and worn boots approached. She looked maybe 30, strong shoulders and tired eyes. "You must be Miss Wynne," the woman said, offering her hand. "I'm Liza Cartwright. My brother Amos was buried beside your Nathaniel." Clara accepted the handshake. "I'm sorry for your loss," Liza nodded. "We came here 5 years ago, built our place board by board. Everyone said we wouldn't last a season. Guess we proved them wrong." She looked Clara over, not unkindly, just measuring. "And what about you?" Liza asked. "What happens now?" Clara glanced toward the graves. "I don't know. I asked the sheriff to take me to the ranch." "You mean to stay?" "I mean to see it. Decide after." Liza's expression didn't change, but she gave a short nod. "That land's not for the faint-hearted, but it's good land." Nathaniel knew what he was doing. "You go take a look. The soil might speak louder than grief." That afternoon, Sheriff Garland hitched a wagon and met Clara outside the hotel. The journey to the ranch was quiet, the trail rough and unmarked. Clara sat stiff beside him, her dress cinched tightly, her hair pinned hard against the wind. He pointed as they crested a rise. "That valley there, Sweet Creek, cuts through it." Nathaniel called the place Ember Ridge. Below, the land rolled out like a hidden Eden, hills sloping into a grassy basin, willow trees lining the creek, a modest cabin nestled beneath the rise. A corral leaned in the wind, and 3 cattle grazed in lazy, slow arcs. No fences, no smoke, no footprints. "Place has been untouched since the attack," Garland said. "Looks like time just stopped." Clara stepped down from the wagon and walked slowly toward the porch. Everything Nathaniel had written about was here. The bench by the door, the tin lantern hanging crooked on a nail. She reached for the handle and found it unlocked. Inside, dust motes floated in the light like tiny ghosts. A single chair faced the fireplace. Dishes stacked neatly in a wooden rack. A pot hung over the hearth, still black from the last fire. He'd been preparing for her. A single yellow flower, dried now, sat in a mason jar on the table. Clara blinked hard. She wandered toward the small desk in the corner. There she found a leather-bound book, a ledger. Inside, Nathaniel had tracked every expense, every sale, every calf born. The last entry, written in careful script just days before his death, read, "Ordered white paint for the porch. Clara arrives next week." Her hand trembled. This cabin wasn't just some rough shelter. It was a promise made solid. "I want to stay," she said suddenly. Sheriff Garland turned, surprised. "Pardon?" "I'm not going back to Pennsylvania. I want to stay. Work the land." Garland frowned. "Miss Wynne, I don't doubt your resolve. But this isn't some parlor fantasy. You'll need help, gear, know-how. You're not legally married to him. You've no claim. I corresponded with Nathaniel for 9 months. We planned this life together. I sold everything I had to come here." She pulled a folded page from her bag. The letter where Nathaniel had written, "I seek a partner, not a servant." Garland looked down at it, then back at Clara. "That letter won't hold up in court. Then I'll hold up myself." She turned to the window, facing the windswept hills, the rustling trees, the silence. Someone has to finish what he started. Clara woke before dawn. The fire had burned low in the hearth, casting soft orange shadows along the cabin's wooden walls. Her trunk sat unopened by the door, her coat draped over a chair. She hadn't changed out of her travel dress. Sleep had been a shallow thing, punctuated by the creak of timber, the wind moaning low across the hills, and dreams of a man she'd never meet. She rose, pulled on her boots, and stepped outside. The air was sharp, laced with dew. A faint mist hugged the earth, curling low across the pasture. Somewhere beyond the willows, a bird called out to the morning. Clara stood with her arms wrapped tight across her chest, eyes fixed on the eastern horizon. The first light hadn't broken yet, but it was coming. By midday, she had boiled coffee on the stove, found the pump for water, and taken stock of the supplies Nathaniel had left behind. The pantry held sacks of flour, beans, dried apples, jars of jam, and enough coffee to last a season. He had been ready for her. The cabin, though rough, had a quiet logic to it. Hooks placed just so. A battered bookshelf with volumes of Emerson and Pliny. A coat rack near the stove. The more she explored it, the more Clara saw it for what it was. Not just a home, but a life in progress. That afternoon she walked the property. The creek still ran clear. She found the vegetable patch Nathaniel had mentioned in his letters, now overtaken by weeds but workable. The barn held tools, some rusted, some sound, and in the corner of the corral, beneath the overhang, stood a horse. "Rusty," she whispered, reading the name stitched onto the worn bridle. The chestnut gelding stamped once, eyeing her warily. She approached slowly, arm out. He didn't flinch. "I suppose you're stuck with me too." By the time she returned to the cabin, her boots were caked in mud, her hair wind-whipped and tangled. She made a list: feed, fencing repair, tack oil, seed, then stared at it for a long while, pen resting against her chin. Where would she begin? A knock at the door startled her. She crossed the room cautiously, shotgun in hand, and cracked the door open. A woman stood there, broad-shouldered, sun-darkened, dressed in men's trousers and a flannel shirt. "Don't shoot," she said, grinning. "I come bearing pie." Clara blinked. "I'm sorry. I'm Evelyn Morrow. My boy and I live north of the ridge. Heard you stayed after the funeral. Decided to introduce myself." Clara opened the door fully. "That's kind of you. I figured someone ought to stop by. You plan on staying?" "I do." Evelyn's grin widened. "Good. The land needs more people with spine." Inside, over black coffee and peach pie, Evelyn listened as Clara explained her intentions. The ledger, the land, the promise she intended to keep. "You got grit," Evelyn said when she'd finished, "but grit won't drive cattle or fix busted fences. You'll need help. I plan to hire hands. Nathaniel worked with a boy named Jonah Holloway. I hope to bring him back." Evelyn nodded. "Jonah's good. Young. Quiet. Knows horses better than most." They spoke for nearly an hour, about ranching, neighbors, the storms that came hard from the west in October, and the coyotes that came harder from the woods in spring. Before she left, Evelyn stood on the porch and looked Clara over once more. "You know, when I came west, I cried every night for the first month," she said. "Damn near went back to St. Louis. But I stayed. I built, lost, and rebuilt again. This land, it takes everything from you, but it gives something back too. Eventually." Clara watched as she rode off toward the northern ridge, her figure slowly swallowed by the distance. She spent the rest of the day hauling water, stacking wood, and scrubbing the cabin until her shoulders ached. She ate dinner in silence and wrote her first entry in Nathaniel's ledger. September 17th. Settled in, supplies sufficient, met neighbor Evelyn Morrow, will seek help before winter. The land waits. That night she stood on the porch and looked out over the fields. The wind rustled the grass like waves across a dark sea. Somewhere wolves howled far and faint. Clara Wynne was alone, but not afraid. The following morning, Clara rose to the sound of rain tapping gently on the roof. It wasn't the hard, angry kind she'd grown used to in Boston, the kind that soaked through bone and brick, but a quiet, steady whisper, like the land itself was catching its breath. She stood at the window for a while, watching droplets trail down the glass. Her hands curled around a steaming tin cup. The calendar on the wall, Nathaniel's, was marked in pencil. Jonah returns 3 days from now. If he showed. She spent the morning in the barn, brushing down Rusty, oiling his saddle, practicing how to cinch and uncinch without fumbling. The first time she tried to mount, the horse gave a grunt of protest and sidestepped, nearly dumping her face first into the mud. The second time, she managed to stay on. Progress. Clara trotted slowly around the perimeter, eyes scanning the fence lines. Some posts had collapsed. Others leaned like drunkards in a barroom. She made mental notes, adjusting her grip on the reins, her thighs aching with every movement. The west pasture would need immediate work. The south fence, Well, if someone wanted to sneak through it, they'd only need to breathe on it hard enough. By late afternoon, she returned to the cabin soaked to the knees and sore from the saddle. She peeled off her coat, lit the stove, and pulled Nathaniel's ledger from the shelf. She studied his entries. Every calf born, every cow sold, repairs done, tools bought. There were notes in the margins, jotted thoughts about weather patterns, how many crows he saw in the morning. Crows always know when change is coming. A line about Evelyn Morrow bringing cornbread on his birthday. Then one that stopped her. March 2nd, saw a hawk circling above Sweet Hollow. Wonder what it's waiting for. Clara traced the line with her fingertip. She'd never met the man, yet his absence pressed on the air like gravity. That night, after a supper of beans and dried apples, she sat on the porch with the shotgun across her lap. Evelyn had warned her about coyotes, and Clara wasn't about to test the theory unarmed. The moon hung heavy and low, spilling silver across the hills. From the trees beyond the south fence, she heard a rustle, then hooves. She stood. A rider was approaching. Clara raised the shotgun instinctively, one hand bracing against the porch post. "Easy," a young voice called. "It's Jonah. Jonah Holloway." He came into view, no older than 20, gangly but solid. A wide-brimmed hat dripped rain down his collar, and his horse looked just as weary as he did. She lowered the barrel. "You're early." "Storm moved in faster than I thought," he said, dismounting with a grunt. "Didn't want to wait it out at Hollow Creek. Figured you'd rather have the help now than later." "I would." He tied off his horse and stepped under the eaves, removing his hat. "You're Clara." "I am." He looked her over, not disrespectfully, just curious. "Nathaniel said you had a spine." "I'm trying to prove him right." They shook hands, firm and square. Inside over coffee, Clara showed him the ledger, the repairs needed, her plans. Jonah nodded occasionally, but mostly stayed quiet, listening, observing. She liked that. No chest thumping, no smug smirks, just a young man raised by land and labor. "Lot to do," he said finally. "I know. I'll start with the south fence tomorrow, if you've got extra posts and wire." "We do." He sipped his coffee and looked around the cabin. "Place is quieter than I remember." Clara followed his gaze. "You worked with him long?" 2 years, on and off." "What was he like?" Jonah paused. "Fair. Didn't say much unless it mattered." "That tracks. But he talked about you." Clara blinked. "Me? Not by name, but yeah, the woman from back east. Said he didn't want a wife who'd vanish at the first snapped fence or prairie storm. Said you were built from better timber." Clara didn't know what to say to that. She just nodded and let the quiet stretch long. Jonah stood. "I'll sleep in the bunkhouse. Be up at first light." As he left, Clara walked to the window and watched the rain pick up again, the wind rippling across the tall grass like waves on a black sea. She wasn't Nathaniel's wife, wasn't anyone's daughter anymore either. But for the first time since stepping off that coach in Dustwater Creek, Clara Wynne didn't feel like a trespasser. She felt like someone standing on her own land, and she intended to keep it. 3 days passed like one long breath. By the fourth morning, Clara had blistered palms, bruised knees, and sunburn across the bridge of her nose. But the south fence stood straighter than it had in years. Jonah worked hard and said little. Just like Nathaniel, Clara guessed. They didn't talk much during the day, but when dust settled and dinner was on the stove, he'd loosen up. Told stories about roundups gone wrong, a horse named Cricket that hated everyone but him, and a one-eyed rooster that ran off a coyote once. Clara listened. She liked the quiet between them. It was the good kind, the kind you didn't feel the need to fill. On the 5th evening, they sat on the porch, boots off, nursing mugs of black coffee. The air was heavy with the scent of cut hay and impending rain. "You're holding up," Jonah said. Clara raised an eyebrow. "Expecting me not to?" He gave a slight grin. "Didn't say that. Just folks talk in town, you know." She looked away, jaw tightening. "What do they say?" "That you're wasting your time. That you'll be gone before first frost." "And what do you think?" Jonah shrugged. "I think if you were going to quit, you would have done it the first time Rusty bucked you into the dirt." She smirked. "Fair point." Just then, a distant rumble reached them. Not thunder, hooves. Clara stood quickly. A single rider approached, moving fast. Jonah stepped down from the porch, resting his hand on the butt of his revolver. The man pulled up short near the gate, raising both hands to show he meant no harm. "Name's Avery Barnes," he called out. "From Hollow Creek." Clara narrowed her eyes. "What brings you here?" "Warning." That word chilled the air between them. Avery dismounted slowly, his eyes scanning the hills behind him. "Heard talk in Dry River. Two of Harlan Boyd's men came through. Said they're heading west, asking about Sweet Hollow and the woman who took over Nathaniel Wynn's place." Clara didn't blink. "What do they want?" Avery shifted uncomfortably. "Boyd's looking to expand. He's buying up small spreads, and if folks won't sell, he sends men." Jonah finished flatly. "Something like that." Clara crossed her arms. "Why warn me?" Avery hesitated. "Nathaniel once let my father water his herd here when we were drying out. Didn't charge a cent. Said the land was meant to be shared when it mattered. I figure I owe the man something." Clara nodded slowly. "Thank you." He tipped his hat. "They'll come at night, if they come at all. Lock your doors, ma'am." And just like that, he was gone. Jonah didn't speak for a moment. Then, "Boyd's gang doesn't bluff. If they said your name out loud, they're coming." Clara stared out into the dimming horizon. "Let them." Jonah turned to her. "You ever fired a gun at something that could fire back?" "I fired a shotgun at a raccoon. Does that count?" He didn't laugh. "I'm serious, Clara. These men don't spook easy. You can still walk away." She looked at him. Really looked. "I didn't come all this way to Tucktail. This land was promised, not handed. I'll fight for it." Jonah nodded, respect settling deeper in his gaze. "Then we start preparing." That night, they reinforced the doors and windows, checked the ammunition, went over the layout of the ranch, the sight lines, the soft spots in the fences. Jonah taught her how to reload quicker, how to brace for recoil, how to breathe through the shot. By midnight, Clara was in her father's old work coat, sitting beside the lamplit window with the shotgun across her lap. She wasn't scared, not in the way she had been on that first day in Dustwater Creek, dragging her trunks down a strange street with no one to greet her. No, this fear was clearer, sharper, but it was hers. When Jonah returned from his perimeter check, he found her awake. "You should sleep," he said quietly. "I will, after the storm passes." He looked at her, then at the sky, where clouds were gathering again. "This storm's got men in it," he murmured. Clara didn't reply, but her grip on the shotgun tightened. The rain came first, software, gentle, almost tender, like the land itself was holding its breath. Clara sat still by the front window, eyes scanning the dark. Jonah paced slowly near the hearth, rifle cradled in his arms. The clock ticked loud. Then, dogs barked. Jonah froze. Clara rose. Lights, moving fast along the ridgeline. 4, maybe 5 riders, torches flaring against the rain. "They're here," Jonah said, already moving to extinguish the lantern. Clara followed him to the door. "You said they wouldn't come in the rain." He glanced at her, jaw tight. "I said most men wouldn't." She nodded once. No panic, no tears, just purpose. They took position, Jonah at the back of the cabin near the root cellar. Clara crouched by the window, shotgun resting on the sill. Rain slicked the glass, but she could still make out silhouettes breaking off, circling. "Try not to shoot me," Jonah called low from the back. "Only if you don't shoot me first," she replied, steady as stone. Then a voice called out from the dark, "Miss Wynn!" The voice was calm, too calm. "Come out nice and slow. We just want to talk." Clara stepped to the porch. Rain soaked her in seconds, but she didn't flinch. "I can hear you just fine from here," she called back. A rider emerged into the open. Dark coat, wide hat, the kind of man who looked more comfortable in shadow than sun. "We don't want bloodshed. You sell the ranch, we ride on. You stay, bad things happen." Clara cocked the shotgun loud enough to be heard over the rain. "I've had enough of men offering kindness with one hand and drawing iron with the other." The man tilted his head. "Then you've made your choice." Another shape moved, to the left. "Jonah!" she shouted, warning him. Gunfire cracked through the night. Jonah returned fire from the side of the cabin. Clara dropped to a crouch, fired once, caught a rider's leg, sent him crashing down. Horses screamed. The porch railing splintered beside her. She rolled, reloaded, stood again. The storm became a curtain of noise, but Clara stayed calm, focused. One of the men breached the back. Jonah tackled him before he crossed the threshold. They crashed into the wall, fists in fury. Clara saw a second man try the side door. She met him with the barrel of her gun. "Don't," she said. He hesitated and blinked. That moment cost him. Jonah's boot sent the door slamming shut again. 2 down, 3 remained. "You people don't learn," one shouted from the yard. "We learn just fine," Clara called back. "We just don't bend." A pause, then hooves. Fast, retreating. They were leaving. The storm faded. Clara stood barefoot in the doorway, soaked, hair clinging to her cheeks, but unshaken. Jonah joined her, blood on his shirt but standing straight. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded. "You?" "Busted knuckle. Worse things." Clara looked out at the battered yard, the broken porch, the trampled soil. "I guess that was our proof." Jonah glanced sideways. "Proof? That I belong here." He chuckled once, then winced. "Damn knuckle." They spent the rest of the night dragging the wounded into the barn, treating what they could. Sheriff Madden rode out by noon the next day, tipped off by Avery Barnes. He brought 2 deputies and a small wagon for the prisoners. By nightfall, Sweet Hollow Ranch was quiet again. Days passed. The story spread, as they always did in the West, about the school teacher turned rancher who stood her ground, about the stranger who fought beside her, about how Harlan Boyd's men met their match in a woman with her father's eyes and a will made of stone. One morning, Clara found herself on the same porch, rebuilt now, watching Jonah saddle a horse. "You heading out?" she asked. He nodded. "South pasture needs eyes. Jenkins' boys saw wolf tracks. You'll be back by dark?" He paused, then smiled. "Yeah, I will." Clara smiled too. Not the small, cautious kind, the real one. The kind you wear when you've earned the land beneath your boots. Sweet Hollow had nearly broken her, but instead it made her, not the woman she used to be, but the one the land demanded, and she was more than willing to rise.